Thanks for checking out Scotties Hobbies. We're going to get into this video real quick. We're going to be removing this caliper and this rotor with these two screws. To remove this caliper, you have two bolts, actually 4 bolts on the back. This one's a 14 millimeter and this one is a 17 millimeter, I believe. You'll need some other tools that I'll be pointing out throughout this video. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share while you're watching as well, and comment below with the year, make, and model of the vehicle that this video helped you on. I'm using a 14 millimeter 6-point socket. I believe it's a 14. If I'm wrong, correct me below. I lost my notes for this video. But we're going to remove these caliper bolts themselves, set them off to the side so we don't lose them. You might need to use a crescent wrench or a wrench to hold your slider bolts to get those caliper bolts off. It was pretty easy for me though. Remove these two springs off of your pads, set them off to the side. Hopefully the new pads you got have these in them, so you could replace them with new. Never let your caliper just hang by the brake line itself. I usually use a bungee cord like this that I have rigged up and use a lot, and hang it up on the coil spring so it's up out of my way. And there's no pressure being put on the actual brake hose itself. Now we're going to remove the brake pads. I had to use my little wedger to get them out. Multi-tool, I should say. Take note of where your wear indicator is. You could see that one was on the inboard pad. Most of the time they are, but sometimes they vary. And just take note of where you took them from. Using a 17 millimeter 6-point socket, remove your caliper housing bolts. When you do reinstall all these parts, make sure you use the proper torque specifications, and you will find those in this video later on. Just make sure you stay tuned and I'll show you what those proper torque specs are. Also, if you need any of the parts or tools shown in this video, make sure you look for the link in the description below to purchase those. Make sure you set your parts off to the side to where you won't lose them or damage them by setting something on them, ruining the threads or such. When you buy your pads, make sure you have pads that come with silencers or shims, such as this one right here. I'm just doing this for video's sake, so I'm reinstalling everything. But a good pad set should have shims. As well, make sure your slider pins or bolts right here are properly lubricated before installing. These ones look pretty good. Again, this is just for video's sake. Make sure they move freely. There's nothing in the way that's hampering them from moving. Now to remove the rotor itself, you're going to need this impact driver. There will be a link in the description below to purchase this as well, and it makes the job so much easier. These two screws are mostly there for production. It makes it a lot easier to put the parts together when it's all held together properly. So these are just production screws. I've heard you don't need to put them back in, but I do. Remove them, set them off to the side. They are really small and really easy to lose. Simple. Now your rotor should freely come off. If it doesn't, just whack it with a hammer, like a dead blow or something. You're obviously going to get your rotors machined or new ones. While your rotor is off, make sure your hub assembly is not loose or the bearings inside aren't bad. Do a good inspection while they're off. Make sure you line up the screws with the screws on the hub assembly so they'll screw right in. Again, I reuse the screws. It makes reassembly much easier. You do not need to use the hammer or the impact part of the screwdriver to install your screws. Just put them at German torque specs, and that's just guten tight. You see, just snug them up. That's all you really need to do. Before you compress the caliper or the piston in the caliper, make sure you take off the cap on your fluid reservoir, your brake fluid reservoir that is. Grab your caliper compression tool, such as this one I have. There are a few different styles and some pneumatic caliper compression tools, which are pretty cool. But you will find a link in the description to purchase these as well. Make sure you take advantage of those so you can help me out, hopefully as much as I'm helping you out. Again, comment below with the year, make, and model, or if you have any questions. Now that the caliper is compressed and still dangling up there by the bungee cord, we're going to reinstall the caliper bracket to the knuckle assembly. These are those 17 millimeter bolts that we took off in the beginning. Snug them up with your fingers, get them both nice and snug, and you will need a torque wrench to get this part of the job done for the reassembly. There might even be a link in the description below to buy a torque wrench as well. On this vehicle, we set the torque to 72 foot-pounds. 72 foot-pounds. When we're tightening it up, I always make sure I get a good 3 clicks out of the torque wrench to make sure that it is nice and fastened. We're going to do them both, make sure they're properly torqued to 72 foot-pounds, and I'll just go through and just double check both one more time. Now install the brake pads. Always make sure you get a decent set of brake pads, and you can find lifetime warranty at a local shop. And your inboard pad had your wear indicator, so make sure it's reinstalled in the same fashion that you took it off. This job is really simple, it's not hard. Most vehicles are like this. Don't forget the springs. This helps the pads take friction off or lose friction from the rotor when you're not pressing on the brake itself. So these are kind of important. Now we're going to grab our caliper. Don't forget to take the bungee cord out. Don't leave it under the wheel well. You might rip the plastic out. Heard from a friend. Set that bungee cord off to the side. Now put your caliper on itself to the housing and grab your little 14mm bolts that you set off to the side. Again, get these snug tight with your finger, and you're going to use a torque wrench to tighten them up properly. On these bolts, we're going to torque them to 22 foot-pounds. And to tighten them, you will need a crescent wrench or something to hold the slider pin to get a proper torque specification on this one. When you're tightening them up, they do have a tendency to slide around. This job doesn't take long at all. This video is about 9 minutes long, or a little bit under 9 minutes long, but the job itself took me about, I'd say, 45 minutes to 55 minutes, and I've done quite a few of these. But if it was on your first one, I'd say it probably will take you about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, maybe. And if you do have any questions or you get stuck somewhere, make sure you come and ask questions, comment below, sorry. Using my torque wrench, like I said, we're going to properly torque this to 22 foot-pounds. I believe the actual torque specification is 21.7, but 22 seems to be okay. You can just make these snug, but if you want to do a good, proper brake job, make sure you torque everything and lube everything. And that's pretty much it for the brake job itself. Before you get in and start the vehicle, well, we're going to get these 3 clicks. But before you put the wheel on, take off, make sure you put the cap back on your reservoir, like this, and pump your brake pedal until it gets nice and firm. Hopefully this video helped you out. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you on the next hopefully helpful video.